Brawl Talk just released and it seems like we're getting this time 12 new HyperCharges. So today I'm gonna rank all of them from worst to best. Hope you enjoy. Before we start ranking the HyperCharge, I just want to say that I don't know anything about any stats of the HyperCharge, so some of the rankings could change potentially. With this being said, let's start with the worst HyperCharge of them all, which is Mandy. Not only I think it's the worst, as in my opinion it's also the most disappointing of them all. The only case where I think this could be helpful is if you're trying to one-shot a Frank right on top of you, but the super also takes the same unload time, and truth being said, even though it looked cool on the Brawl Talk, I really don't think this will ever be helpful. Even less if it's a HyperCharge. As a mutation it made some sense, but as a HyperCharge it's just not gonna work. So in my eyes I'm expecting this HyperCharge to be borderline D tier, like really bad. Next we have B, and I just want to quickly say that I don't think the HyperCharge is bad, but in comparison to the rest it will be hard to get as much value. Like, I think that most of the good stuff about the HyperCharge, it's just the bonus damage. Because the super itself, it's now what? A little bit more of a sniper counter. On top of that, the split Bs deal half the damage. So that is another negative kinda to the HyperCharge. So I really don't think the HyperCharge is gonna be really that impressive outside of the stat increases. Next we have Lola, and honestly, that buffed ego looks funny as hell. Like, it's so weird. As for the HyperCharge itself, even though it's in 10th place, I think that this HyperCharge will be in and around the C or B tier, mainly because Lola does cycle her super once you get your first super, and even though they put it on the Brawl Talk playing the buffed ego separate to yourself, you can just put the buffed ego on top of yourself and you will deal even more damage. The only problem, especially when compared to the other spawnables, is that the buffed ego practically doesn't have any bonus HP, and it's has countered has the regular ego, so it's not really that big of an upgrade. So therefore it will get the 10th place. In 9th place we have Buster's HyperCharge, and when I first saw the Brawl Talk I actually thought that if you come too close to the shield you would also receive damage, and if that was the case it would have been an amazing HyperCharge, but in reality it just simply increases the reflected damage. And honestly, not saying it's horrible, but it just makes the HyperCharge too specific. Like, how many times will you really need a 360 shield? Like, only in hot zone really. It's the only place where I could generally see this being helpful. Obviously you have the stat increases, and it does seem like Buster gets a good chunk of bonus damage, so that is a really good thing. And I am honestly really expecting the HyperCharge to be really good because you also have the passive trait to charge the HyperCharge, so the cycle will most likely be better than usual. Therefore, I feel like this HyperCharge will get the 9th place, probably in and around the B or low B tier. Next, in 8th place we have Meg, and honestly, what a disappointing HyperCharge, especially considering that she's meant to be a legendary brawler. Your sword is larger. How simple. Plus, if you summon the mecha while HyperCharge, you get what it seems to be 3k shield, which will decay over time as well. Nothing really that spectacular. On top of that, the bonus damage it seems to only be 10%, because she's only dealing 660 for each 2 bullets, so that means that you won't even be able to be that aggressive. But because the mecha cycles supers like crazy, I generally think that the HyperCharge would be really good purely because of the cycle. And also the sword does have a really big range, so I really do need to consider that massive range. Next, in 7th place we have Carl, and your HyperCharge leaves a fire trail. Man, they just yoinked Carl's gadget from like 10 years ago. How creative. But at the same time, I think the HyperCharge will be really good just because of how much pure damage you'll be able to do. The HyperCharge increases your damage according to the Brawl Talk by 20%. You will shred through enemies with the HyperCharge, especially if they walk on the fire. With this being said, I do think you will also be able to cycle the HyperCharge faster, because if you play well with Carl, you can cycle supers fairly well. So I am confident that these HyperCharge will be overall around the B tier as well. In 6th place we have Bo's HyperCharge. Now, I actually really like the HyperCharge purely because it does not reset any old mines. Plus, the damage boost, I actually think it's the full 25%, which can be really good. So, Bo with the HyperCharge would destroy people, kinda how he used to do before he received that damage nerf. And also you would have a lot of area control, so I could very well see this HyperCharge being really strong, especially if you can cycle the HyperCharge. Like, depending on how fast you'll cycle it, like if it only costs 2 supers, I would say it would be a A tier HyperCharge. Although I am expecting it to be like 2.5 supers or 2.85, so probably in that most realistic scenario, it will be around a high B tier. Next we have Sam in 5th place. Now, I would almost rank this first place HyperCharge, but you do always need to hit at least one enemy, which for, let's say, professional players, that could be a big issue. Not to mention that I don't know very well why, but in the trailer for Sam's HyperCharge, the HyperCharge didn't really seem that impressive, so that's maybe why I'm also putting it slightly lower. And also I am very interested on seeing how will they pull out the HyperCharge rate, because you get the super whenever you grab the Knuckle Buster. So I'm really curious to see how they will handle this, because these HyperCharge could be really strong depending on the charge rate. So I'm interested to see where Sam will go after this HyperCharge. In 4th place we have Grom, and his HyperCharge damage, it's insane. The HyperCharge nearly deals 4,000 damage. Not to mention that because there is a tiny delay between each of the explosions, it means that you can kinda get 2 stuns at once. So the HyperCharge could have so much value. Double stun, area control, the insane damage. Like, I am really seeing this HyperCharge being really strong, and I'm happy because Grom really needs it. Next we have Mr. P, and Mr. P has the most average HyperCharge spawner ever. And that's a really good thing, because now you can have up to 2 porters on the field, and that will be so annoying. Like, I am already seeing it, especially if you cycle it fast. I could see Mr. P very well be like in the same spot as Penny is right now, where suddenly after that new HyperCharge it just becomes unbearable to deal with. The double spawner could be so strong. Like, I might be overreacting, but then I thought about Mr. P's first gadget. Will it apply to both of the porters? Because if yes, then we are in serious trouble, because that gadget will be really good. And the HyperCharge could very well be almost a S tier HyperCharge, like A+. Next we have my boy Chester, and seems like he got a pretty damn OP HyperCharge. Start off, the damage, the bonus damage seems to be 25% because he just shredded through all of those brawlers. Secondly, the super will be so good. The damage, then poison on top of it, and then the slow, just really to confirm the kill, you know. The cycle potential with the HyperCharge super as well could be so broken. And I am so happy, because since Chester got those nerfs, it has just never been the same thing. So this HyperCharge will be a game changer, and I am telling you, unless the charge rate is insanely bad, the HyperCharge will be S tier for sure. And now we have everyone's favorite new HyperCharge, Hanks. The super guided torpedoes is so cool. It will be so strong, especially when we consider super cycle, the heals, the tank trait as well. The tank trait will allow you to get this hypercharge easily. Combined with the heals, it will be so good. Like, unless the charge rate is insanely bad, like, I am just seeing this hypercharge being what might potentially bring Hank back into the meta. It has been like, what, 2 years or something like that? Because the hypercharge looks so much fun, actually. It's so guided that it's practically guaranteed to hit the torpedo if it went on the right direction. Like, it will be really good, because it will also allow you to have this sort of area control, which will be so good at long ranges. Man, I'm just hoping that the charge rate is like 50% or 40%. And there you have it, all of the brand new hypercharge rank from worst to best. Hope this helped you to decide which hypercharge you would try to buy when they go to the store. And I am so excited for these hyperchargers. Write your opinions down in the comments below. Trust me, I will read them. And I'll see ya on the next video.